everyone, now Blossom is back, and welcome back to another episode of Top Drives and another episode of my Cash Cow series. Now, if you're brand new to this series, basically what I do is I work up the rarities from uncommon all the way to legendaries, and I nitpick on what are the cards that I tend to use the most in clubs. Now, this list is not subject to only clubs, but these are the cards that I tend to gravitate to the most when it comes to the club game mode. Of course, they can be very useful outside of the game mode itself, but this is basically a club game mode. If you want to play clubs and you want to know what are the best super rares to use, I'm going to show you my personal opinion. These are the cards that I gravitate to use the most. Now, before we get into it, we need to familiarize ourselves with clubs and the requirements. So cards that fall into requirements that are more common are definitely going to be useful than cards that maybe have niches in requirements that never show up in clubs. So real quick, I do this for every series. I'm going to show you all of the super common requirements that you're going to see in clubs throughout the week when you play the game. So the super common niches would be ×5 front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, 5-seater, saloon. Now the saloon one I would say is very special because obviously in this miscellaneous kind of tag, there are also other tags like estate, hot hatchback, or just hatchback. Hot hatch is a tag, so you know, hatchback, estate, roadster, convertible. We never see those in clubs, but saloon is the only one that tends to show up all the time. We have the countries from the big six. So basically, if I go into filter and I go into countries right now, Japan, Germany, the USA, the UK, Italy, and France, those are the big six. Also, all-surface tires, ×5 standard tires, and performance tires, petrol cars, 2-seaters, and anything Italian Renaissance and before that update. Additional niches that get brownie points in clubs are cars that are, you know, medium ground clearance, off-road tires for, you know, the off-road tracks in clubs, because one thing that you may not know about clubs is that there is a 100% chance that there's always going to be off-road. There's always going to be a 100% chance of mud, okay? Mud or gravel or sand or dirt, anything like that. So off-road tires are basically the king. They're always beat all-surface tires. So all, you know, off-road tires is basically what you want. Handling cars and specialists as well are going to be very, very useful. So now we move on to uncommon niches. Now, I've said this in the last episode when it came to cash cow rares. Uncommon niches, I do apologize, isn't the best way to describe them because they're not uncommon. They never show up. So these are niches that never show up in clubs. You will never see this as requirements. So if your car has anything, like if your car is a 4-seater, that's a bit of a disadvantage because you're not going to use it in maybe a fraction of events in clubs compared to a car that's a 5-seater, because 4-seater never shows up in clubs. So let me show you these requirements. I'm going to give you a list of the requirements where you will never ever see in clubs until Hutch updates it. But Hutch has not updated their requirements since the game mode basically came into the game. So how long is it? Almost 3 years now? Yeah, it shows you how much they care about the game mode, huh? But anyway, let me show you what are the uncommon, I guess the impossible or the, you know, invisible niches, right? So ×5 4-seaters, ×5 country from the non-big six. So basically ×5 Sweden, ×5 the Netherlands, Croatia, Australia, you name it, right? Imagine ×5 Australian clubs, though. That's not gonna happen. ×1 Australia, that could happen one day, you know? ×5 1-seaters, sorry, not 5. 5 shows up all the time. 1-seaters or slick tires. 5 times electric, hybrid, or other fuels. European Revolution, American Frontier, Great Exhibition. Basically anything after Italian Renaissance never shows up in clubs, and their respective brands as well. So ×5 Bentley, ×5 Aston Martin. If the brand is new, it won't show up in clubs because obviously clubs there's ×5 Nissan, ×5 Subarus, but those are OG brands. They just tend to benefit because JPT basically revamped them. And then ×5 Coupe, ×5 Estate, and like I said earlier, Coupe, Estate, convertibles, roadsters, hatchbacks, they don't show up. Basically, the only ones that do show up are saloons, and that's why I like to focus on saloons. Basically, I started off specializing with American cars when I started playing Top Drives, but now I basically transitioned to saloons because of how useful they are in multiplayer events, but they also are very useful in clubs, and most saloons tend to be 5-seaters, so that's another niche that can be added into clubs. Obviously, I focus on clubs. I need to get that cash so I can make those 1 million pack openings for you guys. And talking about making money, these are the cards that I use the most. So, super rares. I want to tell you about my super rare strategy real quick, okay? You're going to see a lot of low end and a lot of high end because usually when it comes to super rares, I don't really care about anything in the middle unless it's a standout. And they're very little standout. So usually when it comes to super rare events and clubs, you know, usually I like to go a mixture of low end and high end. I want to use the high end, so obviously I would substitute it by saving RQ with the lowest, you know, RQ cards I can. So let's get into it. The Mitsubishi Colt starts us off RQ40, medium ground clearance, that's the main thing, and very, very, very good handling. handling. Those are the two main things that I use here. Basically, City Live-In, City Streets, Dragon City, for the city portions, anything with a medium ground clearance, the Colt is a card that I like to use, but it's also really good on the Twisty because it's also very light. So with the handling, with the lightweight, it's a card that you can also use in the Slalom, the Twisty Road, Twisty Circuit, Hairpin, all that kind of stuff. But obviously there are better options for those, but what I'm saying is that the Colt, you know, it's passable. It's quite versatile in a sense, so that's why I like to use it. But talking about twisty cars, low ground clearance twisty cars, I like to use the Lotus at least to save RQ. The handling isn't too great, but what makes this really strong is that, you know, the handling isn't too great, but it's not bad, right? The 0 to 60 is low, and it's a very lightweight car. I mean, it's what to expect, you know, it's what you would expect from a Lotus. The Lamborghini Miura Roadster is my low RQ drag car. I basically use it for the 1 mile and the test bowl. I don't like to use it for the quarter and the half, because the 0 to 60 on the Miura Roadster is actually very weak. So 1 mile half because of the MRA and the high top speed. I know 70 handling actually isn't that bad for a dragster, but this is a car that you definitely do not want a 323. You want to focus on that top speed and that MRA because this is the best super rare for the test bowl. It's a Blossom choice. A lot of these cars are Blossom choices and you would know them if you watch those videos, if you watch the Blossom choice videos. But let's be honest, I think you did because it's like one of the most, you know, popular videos on my channel. Thank you for that, by the way. Next up is the Jaguar E-Pace. This is a surprisingly super versatile car because this is the car that I can use in clubs when it's 4-wheel drive times 5, when it's standard tires times 5, when it's SUVs times 5, what else, when it's 5-seaters times 5. So, you know, it's a very, oh, that's another thing, diesel, right? Diesel times 5 never shows up in clubs. So if your car is a diesel, it's already like, you know, it's a little less in value. It dips in value a little bit. That being said, those standard tires times 5, that's another one. The E-Pace is a car that I use quite a bit, and it's also a great car to use to save RQ. Basically, it's a cheap man's Ford Flex, or a cheap man's Volvo 850, or a cheap man's Subaru Levorg, right? It gets the job done, 4-wheel drive standard tires, and over 80 handling. The Avenger RT is another really good car I like to use. It's a very versatile car. It's the same thing as the Colt, but this is a saloon, right? So medium ground clearance, amazing handling as well, and a lower 0 to 60 compared to the Colt. In fact, it's a huge difference, 7.7 to 6.1. This is a car that I like to use for Japan. This is the car I like to use for basically everything else. This car is heavy though, the Colt is light, so that's the one thing the Colt has over the Avenger, but the Avenger also handles very well. It has a saloon niche, it has a low 0 to 60, it doesn't have a top speed, but it really doesn't matter because like the Colt, I like to use this in, you know, city live-in, city streets, Dragon City for the city sections, of course, the city medium sections. Also a car that I like to use for G-Force, not slalom because it's quite heavy, but G-Force, Twisty Circuit, Twisty Road, even the quarter mile perhaps, but quarter mile is really pushing it. The Chevrolet Corvette C4 is another car that I like to use. It's a hybrid car. This is basically the most popular car I like to use to lose by 50 because the MRA on the Corvette C4 is relatively strong, the handling is pretty good, the top speed is decent, the 0 to 60 is weak, but it kind of makes up for it in its MRA. The main thing about the Corvette C4 is that I don't expect it to win. I just want it to lose by 50. It's already a win if I can put it in RQ49 because this is saving me a lot of RQ because it's only RQ40. So the main thing I see in the C4 is a car that only loses by 50 that's a bargain that can save me a lot of RQ. Moving on into Cadillac ELR, this thing is absolutely bonkers. Anytime it's front wheel drive times 5, anytime it's standard tires times 5, even if it's just like anything to do with anything twisty, wet or dry, the Cadillac ELR is a fantastic car to use. 89 handling, standard tires, 4 RQ40, that is one of the best bargains, one of the best super rares in the game in my opinion. The Audi Quattro is basically another hybrid, right? It's a car that I use to lose by 50. It's very much like the Corvette, but the Corvette is a car that I like to lose by 50 on basically low ground clearance dry tracks. The Audi Quattro is a hybrid that I like to use if we have those really messy track sets in clubs where sometimes there's a bit of rain, sometimes there's no rain, so sometimes there's asphalt rain, sometimes there's asphalt dry, sometimes the Silly Streets medium, sometimes there isn't. So the Audi Quattro kind of just has a bunch of little niches that I like to capitalize on. Has 4-wheel drive, has medium ground clearance, it's really cheap to use, the handling is decent, the 0 to 60 is okay. So this is a car that, you know, I like to use from time to time just to save RQ once again. It will lose by 50, sometimes even a little more than 50, but the main thing about using the Quattro is that it's a hybrid. I can use it on basically any tracks that I want it to lose on, and it wouldn't lose on by too much, and it'll save me a lot of RQ. The Alfa Romeo Giulia TZ is basically the Lotus Elise, but if, you know, clubs is times 5 Italian. For some reason, you know, the big 6 always shows up in clubs, right? The big 6 countries, but there is a bias. For some reason, Italian events show up more than anything else. I would say in an order, be Italian, Japanese, German, France, the UK, and the US. The US is like the least common of the big six, which hurts me because that's my specialization. The Peugeot 208 R2. Now, this is the daddy twisty car, okay? So if there's no rain, there's just straight up dry, and I want to use just a little more than RQ40, if I can use a little more than RQ40, the Peugeot 208 is the car to go. It's incredibly light, and it has the best handling. So yeah, I mean, a very, very light car. The only downside for this is slick tires, so maybe there's some of those like, messy track sets, like, road that's taken hot garbage or whatever, where there might be 2 dry track sets, but then the third one is a wet. Yeah, if there's just one wet, you can't use the Peugeot 208 R2 anymore, you know what I mean? But if it's all dry, if it's twisty, I would love to use this to save RQ. It's the same thing for the Nissan Terrano. Anything twisty and off-road and I want to save RQ, this is a car I like to use. It handles quite well for a 4-wheel drive off-road tire car, 441 RQ, and also it has high ground clearance, so it's something that I can use on the motocross, A lot of the front-wheel drive off-roaders, like the Datsun, well, the Datsun's rear-wheel drive, but like the Suzuki Swift, or even the Fiat, I think it's the Seicento, these are cars I can't use on the motocross, but the Terrano I can because of the high ground clearance. And then with the MG Maestro, this is like my city streets go-to car, especially in the UK meta. It's a very lightweight car, coming in at, just a little over 1,000 kgs, handles really well, and the 0 to 60 is respectable. Of course, medium ground clearance, a car I can use for city streets, medium. Basically, this I'll use for the UK. It's not a saloon, so I do get more use out of the Avenger, because the Avenger I can use for its respective country and saloon. But for the MG Maestro, I can only use it for its respective country and front-wheel drive. But I can't use it for saloon because it's not a saloon. I can't use it for hatchback because hatchback times 5 never shows up in clubs. So hopefully that makes sense, when I talked about, the more favorite track sets, more favorite requirements at the start of the video compared to those that never show up. The Acura Integra is like the twisty car that I like to use for the US. So you see a trend here. I got a twisty car for every country, right? I got the Peugeot, that's the general one, but also France. I got the Alfa for Italy. I got the Acura for the US. The Mercedes-Benz SLK 200 is another hybrid that I like to use to only lose by 50, because having this at 323, you get decent handling. 87 handling ain't bad for RQ42, and it has really good MRA. The 0 to 60 on this is absolutely garbage though, but once again, this is a car that I just use to lose by 50 and to save some RQ. The Dodge Caliber RT all-wheel drive, basically a better version of the I-Pace, a little bit more handling than that, so if you can use a little bit more RQ, I like to use the Caliber because it handles better. The Subaru BRZ, this is one of those cars that hit way above its weight class. I put this thing up against like RQ47s, 48s, sometimes even 49s. It's a really good car to save RQ on. Massive stats on this as well. Great handling, a good 0 to 60, or at least okay 0 to 60. The main thing about this is the handling and the weight. Weighing under 1,300 kgs is, light. Next up is the Ford Bronco V8 351. Before the addition of JPT and the Nissan Frontier Attack, this was the car that I liked to use. Off-road tires, high ground clearance, 4-wheel drive, and it had the best handling for its competition. And its competition was basically other American 4-wheel drive off-roaders, but now we have the addition of the Terrano, we have the addition of, the Frontier Attack, so those cars are better, but when it comes to the American meta, this is still the best one to use. This is the car that I like to double back on when it comes to twisty off-road, events, when it comes to clubs. The Abarth 124 Spider is a really good car for the Italian meta. It has really good handling, it's a lightweight car, and the MRA isn't very strong, but it gets the job done. I like to use it on basically anything that isn't a drag, so slalom, G-force, even the fast circuit, the hairpin road. It is one of those sleeper cars, I would say, that just gets the job done, and I like it that way. 45 Citroen C2R2. So obviously now we're moving to the mid-tier super rares. There are not going to be a lot of these. We're going to be jumping from basically all these 40s, and we're going to be jumping all the way to 48 very, very, very soon. Look, 45, 45, 45, 46, and then we're going to see 48 in the Phaeton, right? So the C2R2 needs no introduction. This is, a very good, versatile car with a low 0 to 60, great handling, very lightweight. Anything twisty where I can have, more RQ to work with, I would choose this over the Peugeot, right? It's very simple. If I don't have a lot of RQ to work with and it's a twisty setting, I'd use the Peugeot. If I have a little bit more RQ to work with, I would use the Citroen C2R2. But these cars, they get the job done. They get me the wins, they get me the cash, so I can make these 1 million pack openings for you, okay? The Aston Martin V8 Vantage. Now this is a car that I only use in the UK meta. British drags, I use this 332. That's it. High top speed, low 0 to 60 for its niche, basically UK drags. If not, you want to be using the Lamborghini Miura. The Lamborghini Miura is the best in its class, and this is a car that you never want to compromise on. So if you can, this is the kind of car where I would use like maybe like 2 of it and then everything else RQ40, because this is the best in its class. I want to put my investment into the Lamborghini Miura P400 because obviously you get the most points when you win from a drag, and this is the best in the drag for the super rare meta. So the Lamborghini Miura P400, really powerful car, great MRA, low 0 to 60 and a high top speed. This is a car that you want a 332. I have like I think 4 of them max. We'll look at my cars later. The Acura Integra, once again, is very similar to the C2R2, which is like for the American meta. If I have a little bit more RQ to use, then I would use the Integra over the white Integra. I would use the yellow Integra over the white Integra. It's the same thing with the Camaro. It's a hybrid. I only use this to lose by 50. Once again, if I have more RQ to use, I would favor the Camaro over the Corvette C4. Once again, both of them are basically cars that only lose by 50 though, but they only lose by 50 on basically everything. Fast circuit, quarter mile, it's not slalom for the Camaro because the handling on this kind of sucks, but it's a very versatile car. Moving on is the GMC Yukon Denali. One thing to basically summarize this car is it is the Trailblazer SS for Super Rare. That's it. It's a 332 car. I use it on hill climb. I use it on off-road drags. That's it. Also, the 4-wheel drive gives it more traction over the front-wheel drive and the rear-wheel drive. The Volkswagen Phaeton, this is basically like saloon times 5 or 5-seaters times 5. And it's like, it's Storm Chaser, Rising Storm, anything to do with the wet. I like to use the Volkswagen Phaeton because, of course, it handles pretty well. 4-wheel drive, standard tires, and, of course, medium ground clearance. Now, moving on now, obviously all high-end, 48 and above. So, obviously, as you can see, low-end, high-end. That's basically my strategy when it comes to Super Rare. I don't really use anything in the middle. I go high, I go low. You go all in or you go all out. That's it. Subaru Levorg. This is a car where some people say, oh, it got nerfed because it used to have all-surface tires. I disagree, man. I think it's still fantastic. Still one of the best Super Rares for you to use because standard tires, 4-wheel drive, medium ground clearance. You've heard me say this a million times at this point. It has a killer combination, and of course 86 handling when you max it out. Whenever there's basically rain in Japan and clubs, I use this all the time. I have 2 of them max, and honestly, I want to get 5. Now, moving on is the Renault Sport Megane. This is the best super rare for the city streets medium that isn't a prize car. Obviously, in this series, I don't count prize cars because that wouldn't be fair for some of you that's watching right now if you don't have those cars. So this is the best non-prize, obviously because we don't count the Buick GNX, the best non-prize city streets medium car for the super rare category. Medium ground clearance, amazing handling, and it kind of just has a perfect balance of 0 to 60 and handling and weight and all that kind of stuff. Then we have the Nissan Frontier Attack. This is your daddy for the 4-wheel drive off-road meta for super rares. Amazing handling on this, 4-wheel drive off-road tires. That's all you can ask for, really. You don't need to care about the top speed. You don't need to care about the MRA or the 0 to 60. For the twisty off-road meta, the Frontier Attack, especially snow, is what you want to use. The Nissan Cherry Coupe is also a very strong one. It's basically the Japanese version of the slick tire Clio and the slick tire Europa Cup. It's got a low 0 to 60, great handling, and of course, ridiculously light, right? Moving on, the Ford Flex, 4-wheel drive center tires. It has medium ground clearance and amazing handling. Basically, just a slightly worse Volvo 850, and the Volvo 850 is a car that you should be using a lot in clubs, but like I said, this is a personal standpoint. These are the cars that I use in clubs to earn my money, and I don't own the Volvo, and a lot of you might know why. It's a bit of a meme on the channel at this point, but I do love the Ford Flex. The Fiat Abarth 131 Rally is one of the best cars for clubs because Saloon times 5 is a very common niche when it comes to clubs, and when you search up Saloon times 5 off-road, and like I said, there's always an off-road track in clubs, the Fiat Abarth Rally is one of the only cars you can use. In fact, before American Frontier, it was the only car you can use. American Frontier added one, which was the Dodge Avenger, which was a prize car. Not a big deal because you can only get, every player can only get one, so it's really down to how many Fiat Abarth Rallies you can get, but obviously JPT shook it up. Because JPT added the Bluebird and also, well, both Bluebirds, the Uncommon and the Epic. So that kind of changed it up and it decreased the value of the Fiat Abarth 131 a little bit. But that being said, though, when it comes to super rare metas, if it's off-road, if it's saloon, the 131 Rally is the only option that you can go for. It has decent handling, it's a very lightweight car, and it has medium ground clearance, and of course off-road tires. Rear-wheel drive gives it a little bit more traction over front-wheel drive cars as well, and it's also a very useful car to use. And like I said, Italy shows up in clubs all the time. And if it's Italian times 5 and it's off-road, you can't really use the Bluebirds now, can you? Obviously, you can use the Frontiers. Oh, sorry, wait. I said Italy. This is Japanese. I mean, what other Italian off-roads are there? Oh, right. The Lancia 037. But if you want to save RQ, then yeah, the Fiat is a car that you can definitely use. Suzuki Swift Sport as well is a front-wheel drive off-road tire car that handles very well. It also brings medium ground clearance to the table, and it's very lightweight. So it's a car that I tend to use in off-road front-wheel drive, especially if I want to save a little bit of RQ. Obviously, when it comes to front-wheel drive off-road meta, I like to gravitate towards putting all my investment into the Opel Adams and the Opel Corsas. But, you know, if it is, you know, restricted to only Super Airs or the RQ limit is very tight, then the Suzuki Swift Sport Cup is a car that I tend to use quite often. Moving on now are the two French slick tire beasts with the Renault Sport Clio Cup car and the Renault R21. Both of them very useful for front-wheel drive events and clubs, basically if there's anything that's dry. But yeah, I would say that the R21 has a one-up over the Clio. You would use the Europa Cup a lot more because for the Renault, you can use it for France and you can use it for front-wheel drive. But for the Europa, you can use it for front-wheel drive, and saloon. There you go. You got more use out of that. It's going to win you more money just because it's eligible in one more requirement. But yeah, both really good cars. One is a lower 0 to 60. One is better handling. They are both lightweight. Both fantastic cars. The Opel GT as well is basically a discounted version of the Lotus Elise Sprint. But, you know, once again, if they're German events and clubs or 2000 events and clubs, which shows up from time to time, then this is the car that I would like to use. A low 0 to 60 and good handling. Also, not to mention, it's very lightweight. In the rare instance where it is all surface tire times 5 in clubs, because that does tend to happen but not very often, the Mitsubishi Outlander is my go-to because of the handling. Very good handling. It actually out-handles a lot of all-surface tire 4-wheel drive ultra rares as well, because if you max this baby out, it's 85 handling and it's a lightweight car coming in at 1,555 kilograms. When you think about it, a lot of the SUVs are, you know, 2,000 kilograms, 1,009, 1,008, so this is light and it handles very well. It's a killer combination. The Nissan 300ZX. Now this is a new addition. I only use it for one specific niche, and that is Japanese drags, because it's like the best Japanese drags. In fact, I have this 323 and I kind of regret it, honestly. This is a car that I wanted 332. So for the second one, I'm definitely going to 332 the 300ZX. And from now on, I'm actually going to condone the fact, and I'm going to recommend the fact and suggest the fact that if you only have one 300ZX, 332 it. Okay, obviously I saw the 80 handling, I wanted 89 handling, but the fact of the matter is, this is a better dragster than it is a twisty car. So if you only had one 300ZX, I would go 332 on the first one. But obviously mine is 323 because, you know, I maxed it out when it was, you know, JPT was incredibly new. The Lotus Elise Sprint, I mean, when it comes to the twisty meta, this is basically the twisty version of the Miura, right? So if it's twists and turns, you want to put all of your marbles into investing into the Sprint. You want to put all of your RQ marbles, okay, for the Sprint. So basically, like, if, like, the club event is like Super Air times 5, but it's not letting me use like 49 across the board, I would use maybe 3 Lotus Elise Sprints and then 2 RQ40s, and that's why I have a lot of RQ40s in my wish list category here for my recommendations for cash cows. The Ford Mustang GT convertible, this is the best super rare for city streets small, but outside of that, it's a competent car that you can put on the quarter mile. It's a competent car that you can put on the fast circuit, indoor karting, fast circuit. It's gonna lose by 50 on those, but it's gonna win definitely on a city street small as long as you're not going up against a Buick GNX. Now, the last two cars I want to talk about is the Datsun 240Z. This is still my go-to. You know, even after the handling nerf, this is still my go-to, like, you know, non-four-wheel drive super rare off-roader. It is a fantastic car. Even with the nerf, it is still one of the best. And last but not least is the Audi Quattro 20B. Now, this is basically just, it rhymes with the RQ40 counterpart, right? So RQ40, this is the car that I like to lose by 50. Now, at this point, you know, RQ49 losing by 50 is kind of sus, but sometimes, you know, like if the RQ limit is super generous and you just need a hybrid car, you know, you're already using 4 Lotus Elise Sprints or 2 Lotus Elise Sprints and 2 Lamborghini Miura's, whatever the track set is going to be. You know, if you just need a hybrid car for hybrid's sake, then this is probably the best one to use if you have all of the RQ in the world to use. Obviously, the Audi Quattro on 49 and the Audi Quattro on 40, they complement each other. Let's go back to 40 and where's that bad boy? There it is, right? And once again, it just kind of goes back to me saying that my strategy for super rares, especially in clubs, is just go high and go low. I don't really focus on anything in between. When you think about it, the cars in between, how many 45s do we have? 3 45s. If you count 44 as mid, then maybe 2, you can add 2 more. 46 is mid, so we have 6 cars. as mid, you know what I mean? Like everything else is high and everything else is low end. But anyway, these are the cars that I tend to use the most in clubs, and in turn, these are the cars that tend to win me the most money in clubs. So if you play a lot of clubs and you're, scratching your head on what cars you want to collect, obviously check out Blossom Choice. Those are the best of the best, but this is basically Blossom Choice expanded, right? So these are the cars that I would recommend to you guys. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great day, and I hope you found this video helpful. Please subscribe if you haven't already, because I'm really close to 10k subs, so that'd be great. But anyway, I hope you guys have a great day. Stay safe, wash your hands, and blossom out. Peace!
Bro, this song just makes me so happy.
Me too.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Imagine being Asian in the 50s, looking nifty, leather jacket, looking sleek, look like Presley, look so deadly. Got a jukebox back at home, feeling jazzy, turn it on and play it slow, like the movies with the ladies.
They so fine.
Sit back, relax in my Bonneville Pontiac. Hold tight all night, cruise to Jacksonville
Atlantic.
Blonde hair, don't care, look like Leslie Brooks. Pin up girls everywhere with the drop dead look. Swing it side to side as we slow dance to the night, when I'll hold your perfect hand